Okay, you know the moment I'm talking about. You see that blur skittering across the floor, you act fast, trap it under a cup, and then you stop. You're faced with a classic dilemma. What on earth do you do with it now? Your first instinct, right? It's to be kind. You carefully slide a piece of paper underneath, carry the whole setup outside, and let it go. You feel like you're giving it a second chance, returning it back to nature. But is that what's really happening? In this explainer, we're going to dig in and find out if that good intention is actually the right call.
All right, let's just tackle this head on. This common belief, let's call it the humane myth. It's this gut feeling that letting a cockroach go free is a simple, straightforward act of kindness.
So, the thinking behind the myth goes something like this. The cockroach in my kitchen is just a little lost bug from the great outdoors. If I just put it back in the garden or the park, I'm doing it a huge favor. But as you're about to see, the actual science tells a very different story. Okay, first myth to bust, and it's a big one. That cockroach you found, it's almost certainly not from the park, and it really doesn't belong there. In fact, it's probably a species that literally cannot survive out there. Whoa, get a load of this number. Nearly 98% of all cockroach infestations inside our homes are caused by one single species, the German cockroach. And let me tell you, this isn't some random bug that just wandered in from the cold. Oh no, this is a specialist. Think about it like this. The German cockroach has spent thousands of years evolving right alongside us, getting perfectly adapted to live on our leftovers, in our walls, inside our nice, warm, climate-controlled homes. It's as different from a wild wood roach as a house cat is from a wild tiger. They really do live in two completely separate worlds. And this wasn't an overnight change. We're talking about a 2,000-year evolutionary journey. This species basically hitched a ride with humans as we spread across the globe. It got so good at living with us that today, you can't find it in the wild. It's a creature that is completely, 100% dependent on our buildings to survive. So we've established they're not from the wild. They need us. But that brings up the next obvious question, right? If they depend on us so much, what actually happens when we put them outside? Is it a second chance? Or is it something way worse? Well, here's the breakdown. For the German cockroach, putting it outside is, it's a death sentence. It simply cannot handle the temperature changes. But for some of the other common types, like the American or Oriental cockroach, you're not saving them, you're just moving the problem. These guys are tough. They'll happily set up shop in sewers, drains, or a nearby mulch pile, and maybe even find their way back inside later. And when I say a death sentence, I'm not being dramatic. Just look at what the cold does. At a temperature just below freezing, half of them are dead in 10 hours. Wait just 2 hours, and all of them are gone. That kind release into the cool evening air isn't freedom. It's just a slow, miserable death from exposure. So you're basically left with two pretty bad outcomes. The best case scenario is that you're condemning this little indoor creature to a slow death, and the worst case scenario, with one of the tougher species, you're just unleashing a pest into the local environment where it can breed, spread, and maybe even end up in your neighbor's apartment, or right back in yours. Okay, this brings us to our third and honestly our most critical point. We've talked about what happens to the cockroach, but what about the risk to, well, everything else? It's the dangers you can't see that are often the most serious. More than 40 different kinds of bacteria have been found on the bodies and in the waste of indoor cockroaches. And trust me, that is just the beginning of the story. See, when you release that one cockroach, you're also releasing all of its microscopic hitchhikers. We're talking things like Salmonella, E. coli, parasitic worms, fungal spores, not to mention the allergens from their bodies and saliva, which are a huge trigger for asthma. You're essentially taking a tiny, mobile biohazard from inside your house and just letting it loose in a public area. Now, it's super important to make a distinction here. Not all roaches are created equal. As Dr. Jessica Ware points out, the vast majority of the 4,600 cockroach species out there are vital parts of their ecosystems. They're the cleanup crew of the forest, breaking down dead plants. They're nothing like the few species that have adapted to be our unwanted roommates. And that's the danger. When you drop a pest species into that wild environment, you're throwing a real wrench into a delicate machine. They can outcompete the native insects for food, they could spread their diseases to local wildlife, and they can just throw the whole local food web out of whack. So let's recap. Releasing a cockroach is either a slow death sentence or a serious ecological risk. So what is the truly responsible, the truly humane thing to do? Well, according to the experts, the best solution starts long before you ever find a roach in your house. It's a strategy called Integrated Pest Management, or IPM. And it's not about just zapping pests when you see them. It's a much smarter, more complete approach that's all about making your home an unwelcome place for them in the first place. IPM really just comes down to three basic pillars. First, exclusion. You literally block them from getting in by sealing cracks and fixing screens. Second, sanitation. Don't roll out the welcome mat. Keep things clean and dry to eliminate their food and water. And third, monitoring. Use simple sticky traps not just to kill, but to figure out where they're coming from so you can target your efforts. And this approach, it totally reframes what it means to be humane here. The focus shifts away from the fate of one single insect and moves toward the health of your home, your family, and the environment around you. The kindest thing you can do is create a space where this whole conflict never even has to happen. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. What if true kindness in this situation isn't really about the one creature trapped under a glass? What if it's about understanding our larger role and making choices that protect the health of our homes, our neighborhoods, and the amazing, delicate ecosystems that are thriving right outside our door?